Welcome, all you fellow Arcanists out there, to the Frith Guild podcast, where we explore an amazing world full of mystical creatures and their partners. Our hosts are Eric Smith and Scott Wareham, and they'll be your guides along this journey through pirate-infested waters. So grab your Eldrin, strap on your swords, and get ready to defend the seas from evil. Throughout the series, if you've not caught up to the chapters being discussed today, we urge you to hit the pause button, grab your copy of this wonderful book, and catch up. We'll be here when you get back. While Adelgis, Addy, and Hexa search for the occult compass, Volk, Ilya, and Zaxxas sneak aboard the Third Abyss to rescue Master Zelfree. But before they can find their dying mentor, they instead find a plague-ridden gargoyle. And unlike any plague beast they have yet encountered, this creature is intelligent and the size of an elephant. Oh, and it can read minds too. But before we get into the book, let's look at two more pieces of advice from the series. Step 7 on the Pillar of Ruma says adaptability. Without it, we break it to the slightest change. As Step 88 says bravery. Without it, we cannot act in the face of fear. So, without further ado, let's join Eric and Scott for chapters 26 through 30 of Dread Pirate Arcanist.
Hello, and welcome back to the Frith Guild podcast. I'm your host, Eric.
And I'm Scott.
And today we'll be getting to chapters 26 through 30 of the Dread Pirate Arcanist. Before we get going into those, we just also want to remind you and ask you, please, when you get done listening to this episode, whether you're listening to a podcast or on YouTube, to either review or like or share, subscribe, all that good stuff. I know like you always hear that on YouTube channels, but it really does help us know that we're moving in the right direction. And if you enjoy parts of the show, or please give us a comment or go on Facebook, send us a message, or comment on the Facebook page. We're going to get into it today in chapter 26.
The Bone Cage. So, recapping from last episode, the group is going to rescue Zelfree, and they hear this voice calling them from inside a room to come enter. And they enter it, and they find this bone cage with a plague-ridden gargoyle. And this gargoyle is described as being the size of an elephant, so absolutely massive. No eyelids, its skin is stretched taut over its body, and the cage is actually a Leviathan bone cage, which prevents the gargoyle from being able to mold it. The gargoyle has a power where it can mold stone, so the bone just prevents it from using its magic to get out. And we see that the blood is actually being drained out, and this is where they would get the plague poison from that was used to infect a griffin and probably used to infect several other magical creatures across. The gargoyle is able to read thoughts, which is not something a gargoyle would normally be able to do, and it actually describes itself as being in its true form or enlightened.
And as the gargoyle is talking to each one of them individually, kind of like the White Heart in the Endless Mire back on Ruma, it starts talking to everybody, and it moves to Ilya, and it calls Ilya Savan, and then it's like, well, wait a minute, you're not, or should I call you Ilya Delamere, which is her actual last name. And I think this is the first time that we find out what her actual last name is.
So very, very powerful and magical creature. And next to the magical creature, there's a second cage, and this cage is empty. And the gargoyle actually explains that this cage is for the world serpent. So we know that Callisto got the scale, and he wasn't just planning on imbuing it and making it into an artifact. He was actually going to use it to try and find the world serpent. And the gargoyle goes to attack Volk, but Trace is able to transform into a nightmare and swing a sword and save Volk from being attacked. And Volk actually notices that when Trace is transformed into a nightmare, her armor wasn't cracked the way that Luther's is. So even though she was mimicking Luther, she did have a slightly different appearance and slightly different makeup than he did.
And I've always been wondering, because anytime that Luther's been described, he's specifically described as being cracked. So my curiosity got the better of me, and I actually reached out to Shammy, and I asked her if that was something that was, per Luther, or if that was something that kind of similar with other nightmares, because we know that not all nightmares look the same. And she did say that Luther actually became cracked after Mathis was killed. And that's kind of like his physical representation of his grief for Mathis.
which is pretty powerful.
Mm-hmm.
The gargoyle then offers to trade information for them to release it, and he says that he will tell Volk where Zelfree is, and ends up telling them and then saying that Volk needs to free him, and Volk kind of fights back by saying, I never actually agreed to do this. I don't really feel comfortable letting a plague-ridden creature out, and although it angers the gargoyle quite a bit, they got the information they needed, so they decide that they're gonna walk on out and go find Zelfree.
I mean, in all fairness, that was probably a good idea of not letting the plague-ridden true form gargoyle loose.
Yes, the size of an elephant does not need to be rampaging around next to everyone who is able to be infected. And as they're leaving to go find Zelfree, Volk is concerned about how they're supposed to get across these spaces, and Luther eventually ends up giving him this advice of, well, if you're confident, people are just going to believe you're supposed to be there. So Zaxxas goes first, and it works flawlessly, and nobody seems to notice or care that he's not really supposed to be there.
And again, this is where we see like Volk struggling with his confidence and his abilities. And Volk has to also remember that others cannot see Volk or pretty much anybody else in the dark, or at least we assume this. And imagine how far away they are, and I think it's raining at this point. Like, nobody cares about what's going on in the rest of the ship. I know we see like a couple of deckhands working, but they're trying to get their job done so they can go inside where it's dry.
Yeah, they're not out looking for somebody to be sneaking around the ship.
Right.
And the group ends up making their way to the captain's office, and they see a giant green scale from the World Serpent. It's several feet long, absolutely massive. And that brings us into chapter 27, which is the World Serpent scale. And they also see in the office, Zelfree is in the corner, and he's been pierced with this ebony arrow in him that's preventing him from healing. So he's been severely tortured. His tendons are cut. His dragon tattoo has essentially been flayed off of him. And what's referred to as this obsidian thorn arrow is actually barbed with manicore venom. So this is another instance of Callisto using that venom, preventing Zelfree from healing himself or having any of his magical powers. And Volk does the smart thing. He actually takes the Phoenix bracelet that he got from Gilly, which prevents sickness and promotes good health. He gives it to Zelfree to try and help heal him some. Zaxxas goes in and is able to remove the arrow and heal him a little bit, but there's only so much that he can do.
Yeah, this is where we see like the distance with Eldarin versus the Arcanist. Zaxxas being further away from Forsyth makes it a lot more difficult and for him to be able to heal. And this is another place where we see that Luther actually like takes off his cape and offers it to Zelfree. This doesn't happen very often. I don't remember too many other times that Luther takes his cape off to help somebody. So this is a big deal.
It is. That cape is his big icon, essentially. And Ilya mentions that she wants to steal the scale, mainly to piss off Callisto. And they kind of talk through it and they realize it's massive. It's way too obvious. Callisto would notice right away. They don't want to draw any extra attention to them. Their main point is getting Zelfree out alive.
Like, okay, Ilya, you've done enough, okay? You've stolen enough things. Leave it be. If you guys are going to get the compass, then you don't need to worry about the scale. We also see when Volk is trying to kind of help move Zelfree. Zaxxas is trying to heal him. Zelfree accidentally calls Zaxxas Traven. And I think, again, this isn't like... Zaxxas really has no idea what's going on. He's just kind of like, yo, this dude's so messed up. He just called me Traven. Like, I don't even know why he did that. And knowing the conversation that Zelfree and Volk had previously about Traven, it gives you that, like, oh man, he really sees Zaxxas as Traven.
As this moment's going on, Spider, who is the Cap Arcanist, ends up walking by, and they think they're going to be okay because it's dark, but she can actually see them, and this is partially due to the Kappa magic, which allows her to see through the fog and see through darkness. And she uses her other power to determine what Volk's age is by smelling him, and notices that there's an age difference with Luther, and essentially is able to figure out that he's second bonded. So I never thought this ability would actually come into play, but she does use it. I don't know if it's effective or not, but she does use it.
I just love how far-fetched that ability is, and dang it, it got worked in somewhere.
Volk and Luther end up merging together to get into this fight with Spider.
So this totally just reminded me. You had a Nintendo 64. Have you ever played Ocarina of Time?
Yes.
This totally reminds me of them being in the Gerudo Fortress, finding the Carpenters.
Yes.
Yes. They find them, and then as soon as they find them, obviously, like, the boss comes out of nowhere.
Yes, and it leads to this huge fight, and it's a great comparison, and it's also a comparison because Volk is so outmatched. It is not a fair fight. Spider is better trained. She's better with her powers. She spits acid at him. And as we move into chapter 28, we actually see that she pushes Volk out the window. And Volk is able to really quickly use his shadow step to move back onto the deck and then ambush Spider. But unfortunately, he hesitates with actually going to kill her, and she's able to escape. While this is happening, Ilya and Zaxxas are lowering Adine from the deck. They're trying to get Zelfree to free, and Callisto comes and actually shoots a pistol at Volk. He's not able to keep firing due to the rain and the weather affecting the pistol, but he does summon Hellion into the fray, and this is the first time we actually see the Manticore. Hellion's described as having black leather wings, a red lion mane, and a mask over the face. There's a scorpion tail and human hands with talons. So it's this mix of a variety of different creatures, and is just described as just being massive and extremely strong.
Don't forget about the mask. Hellion has this white, like a play mask.
Yes.
That's literally just 2 holes for the eyes and a straight line for the mouth. And I have to admit, like, I am god-awful terrified of this freaking mask.
It is so creepy.
It is.
So Callisto comes and he gets into a fight, and Volk uses his tears, and the tears affect everybody, but unfortunately don't affect Hellion. Ilya tries to use teleporting fire. Zaxxas is using in flames, but none of it really matters. Callisto is too fast. He's enhanced with his Manticore, and the pirates know that it's a joke. They essentially form a ring around him like a schoolyard and start cheering him on as he beats up on these little kids. And Zelfree is trying his best here. Traces turns into a Manticore and goes to fight Hellion. Zelfree runs into the fight with his increased stamina, but Hellion, being in much better shape than Traces, ends up stabbing her with the Scorpion Stinger, which forces her to lose her magic and lose the transformation. And as soon as she loses the transformation, so does Zelfree. So he goes back to being a withered, tortured, not very good fighter. Ilya actually gets a great idea and realizes she can't fight Callisto, but she can fight his ship. So she teleports 2 cannons and just drops them onto the ship, destroys the deck. Callisto is absolutely furious. And we actually see that the gargoyle escapes through this. So one of the cannons broke open the cage, and the gargoyle escapes. And everybody in this massive confusion running away from the gargoyle, the team's able to get into the boat, and Ilya actually teleports the whole boat down to the water.
What I like that Ilya picked up on the fact that Callisto didn't want his ship to be damaged. When she was doing like the teleportation fire, he was like, "Hey, look, like, this is all fun and games, but don't you dare mess with my ship." And then, like you said, when she drops the cannons down, like, they're 3,400 pounds apiece, and I can only imagine how high up she dropped these from, and just the pure carnage the damage cannon does. All right, and so now we move into chapter 29, the Lost Compass. Once they're in the dinghy and moving away from the ship, Ilya begins to triage all the injuries amongst everybody, kind of trying to figure out like who needs most attention. Ilya was concerned that Callisto would take Volk after he'd taken so much already.
And this really seemed to give her enhanced powers. So I just picture the stories of, the mothers lifting cars off of their kids and doing things that they have no right to be able to do. And Ilya's sort of being empowered in the same way at the threat of losing Volk.
Kind of that like adrenaline rush to make sure that she can save him. Texas actually manages to have gotten a pair of the glasses that all the crew members were wearing. He finds out that they can actually be seen through the fog and the darkness, and that's what these are. And this is how everybody on Callisto's crew can function on the ship and be able to see through all the fog. They guess that basically this is some kind of Kappa magic. So this is definitely a useful tool for them because they can see everything that's going on with the ghost ship.
I wondered does it also fix like if you have bad vision? Does it
like glasses?
Do they serve as actual glasses as well?
Oh man, I wonder that. That's a good thought. Do you get like better than perfect vision?
Yes, you get 40, like, 20 or...
So Zelfree wakes up while Ilya is rowing, and Ilya is like, I'm gonna row this boat. Like, I don't care how exhausted I am, I'm going to row this dang boat. I just need to do it. Unfortunately, Zelfree is trying his best to take it, to sleep, because like that's really what he needs. Like, this dude is just beat to crap. Anytime that he kind of like starts to doze off, he'll snap back awake. So, you're getting kind of concerned that like how just purely exhausted he is, but he has these nightmares or this inability to sleep.
Yeah, he's running on fumes, and you almost get this feel that he's upset that he was rescued. Like he saw this as his end, and he was okay with it, and is now struggling with the fact of like, oh, I did actually make it out somehow. And Zaxis actually offers to row for Ilya, which is really sweet considering it's coming from Zaxis, but she wants no part of it.
And then I like that Luther is finally like, you know what, Volk, you lack the discipline. So I'm going to make a schedule with Zelfree to train you so that you get stronger and faster and better. And he does this from a great place of love. He doesn't want to lose Volk, or at least another Arcanist. So, you can understand that.
And this is one of the more emotional moments that Luther has. It's expressed through a training regimen, which is not the most loving thing to suggest to your partner, but it is coming from a place of caring and really does let on that Luther truly sees Volk as his partner in crime.
So we finally get to where Addie, Adelgis, and Hexa are, and they are in a mid-sized keelboat looking for the compasses. And again, me having absolutely no understanding or ideology of what these kind of boats are, I have to look it up so I can get an idea. And so keelboat is typically 40 to 80 feet long. For those across the pond or anybody else that uses the metric system, I apologize. I did not do the conversions this time. And so they have a large fin that runs the length of the boat, and it helps balance it because it uses a sail to move. And since it's long but not wide, it needs that extra ballast to keep it from tipping over. And these boats are mainly used in rivers and lakes and sometimes in canals. And these are boats that are used to teach confidence in sailing without so much fear about capsizing. So now that I've rambled on about keelboats and what they look like, moving on. The plus side is they did find the shipwreck and everything in the meantime while the other three and Zelfree are getting there to the shipwreck. And they have found compasses. And the plural is being used because they found all of the compasses.
And this really feels like a practical joke of whoever was transporting this compass just loved compasses, so they filled the whole boat with them. So sift through the compasses and see if you can find the one you're looking for. And Ilya right away wants to jump in and help and actually teleport underwater. And Zelfree, even in his current state, stops her, saying that her teleporting underwater, there's additional water pressure, and she could essentially hurt herself by doing it.
She could get the bends. Zelfree isn't taking a breather and is just kind of like trying to push on.
And you really get this feeling, as much as earlier it seemed like Zelfree thought this was his end, you get the feeling that he's been through this before or something similar, probably something even worse.
And this is where we transition into chapter 30. This is where we find out that both Phoenixes were sent back to let the Frith Guild know and explain everything that was happening. So again, applause to whoever decided to send the Phoenixes back to the Frith Guild so that somebody in the Frith Guild knows what's going on, and it's not just the 7 of them trying to not die. I'm not sure how much time it would take for the Phoenixes to get there on their way back, but hey, somebody eventually will know.
It's progress. It is progress.
Right. Progress to not listening. They sort of, kind of listen. So, in the meantime, because Zelfree can't sleep, Volk actually introduces the idea that Zelfree lays down and Adele uses his magic to put Zelfree into an induced sleep.
And there's actually, Volk recommends that the dreams be related to Ruma and Gilly and adventuring. And Adele just doesn't really understand why, but goes along with it. And it just kind of shows Volk's insight into Zelfree's past and how much more he really knows about Zelfree than everyone else.
And as an apprentice, again, I would never have thought to be like, hey, give him pleasant dreams. Here's what he enjoys. That'd probably be dog tired myself. And it's like, gosh, do the thing to me too, please. So, kudos to Volk for thinking about Zelfree, Volk does ask for the same thing. And Volk, understanding how the whole dream weaving thing works, is kind of prepared for it, at least this time. And he's dreaming that he's swimming in the water. The rest of the apprentices are there. But he doesn't want to get too close to everybody because people will find out how lumpy he is.
And this is another instance. It's very odd in the dream, but Adele just trying to master his dream weaving and accidentally slipping in his own feelings into these dreams. And Adele just, while everybody has been sleeping, has actually narrowed down the compasses to a few magical ones. But the occult compass uses a piece of an Eldrin to find the closest Eldrin nearby. So the Phoenixes are gone, and that's the only pair that they have, so they're not really able to test it very well.
That would be too easy. Because why not? Why would it be easy?
Why take the easy road?
Exactly. It's not fun like that. It's not cool. So, and this is where we finally we also learn about the 2 different types of reproduction for Eldrin. I think everyone that we've talked about so far has been a progeny form, I guess with the exception of Felicity, the ethereal whelk. Every other Eldrin that we've talked about has been progeny, where basically 2 Eldrin get together of the same species and they make little baby Eldrin. And again, we've known about progeny, and then we learn about fable Eldrin. I guess nightmares are also fables too. And with fable reproduction, a set of requirements has to be known or has to be met in order for them to be born.
Yeah, so with Nightmares, Volk mentions that essentially it is from a ruler who is assassinated, and when they're assassinated, the nightmare rises from the dead body. And in the case of the ethereal whelks, like you mentioned, it actually comes from children drowning. So both these very unique situations, which can let something be born even if there aren't. The animal never goes extinct, I guess is a good way to put it.
Right. As long as the requirement keeps being met, then it's going to keep producing. So Volk actually gets to ask Adele just about what's going on with his lump under his skin, because he's getting these really weird dreams about lumps. Volk's kind of putting things together now finally, and Adele just thankfully, Adele just kind of comes clean about it to a degree. Well, Adele just is kind of like, hey, I'm incubating a mystical creature over my ribs. I'm doing this research for my dad. So just like it's okay because he knows about this and like he's keeping track of it. So it's all good. Just don't worry about it.
Given that his dad pushes the boundaries of science, I get the feeling that Adelgis is not incubating a litter of puppies. This is something dangerous, something unique, something potentially very good or very bad.
Right. Like it's just that like poor Adelgis. So Zelfree was actually awake when Adelgis was telling Volk about this, and I'm really glad that he was because Zelfree, finally can kind of understand what's going on with Adelgis. Zelfree feels like all of his apprentices are just trying to inadvertently kill themselves just to spite him.
And this feels accurate. Like, it's just probably pretty true.
It's like, I think he mentions trying to keep the lemmings from jumping off the cliff. Like, just please don't.
Help me. Just help me a little.
Like this is one of those when your kid starts to learn how to walk. This is one of those moments of like, oh, it's so cool that they know how to walk. And then the second you take your eyes off of them, they're gone, and you just like there's no clue. Like they're stupid fast. For as short and small as they are stupid fast. And your job is to make sure they don't die. Like that's literally what it's like raising a 1 to 2 year old, just making sure they don't die. And so Zelfree also basically mentions like, hey, I really don't. I know Adelgis' father, and I really don't trust him. So this is probably not good about what's going on with it.
And considering the range of people that Zelfree's come across, the pirates, the thieves, the adventures he's been on, if he says somebody's has a bad reputation and is not a good person, they're not just like flirting the line. They are not to be trusted.
Right, like these people are bad. Like we really shouldn't be trusting them.
Yeah, this isn't a petty thief. This is a real crime.
They didn't like steal a piece of candy from the store. Like they set the store on fire.
Yes, it is.
So, he does really thank Folk about giving the Phoenix trinket to Zelfree. Mainly because like this is like the one thing that's gonna help Zelfree the most to heal. And again, like he was butchered on Callisto's ship. Like the amount of damage that was done to him basically wasn't able to heal. And thanks to this trinket, I imagine Zelfree was able to heal a lot faster, not only having Traces close to him, but with the help of this trinket. And that ends chapter 30. Scott, did you want to jump in on the bestiary?
Yeah, the new Eldrin that we see is the gargoyle. And we see the plague-ridden one, but the normal one, it's the mythology for it actually comes from statues that were placed on buildings to ward away spirits. We don't know the trial of the worth or the reproduction. Augmentation, it's able to harden objects, it can manipulate stone, and they can evoke this dust that transforms into rocks if enough of it gathers. And they give the same abilities to their Arcanists, so an innate ability of having this hardened and tougher skin.
And that concludes this week's episode of the podcast, chapters 26 through 30. We are getting fairly close to the end, and we'll be all wrapped up with Dreadpire Arcanist. As always, we would like to thank our editor, Dan Mackison, for editing the videos for us. We're also on Podbean, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts. We have a Facebook group, the Frith Chronicles Podcast. We're also on YouTube, so if you'd like to see Scott and I talking and discussing this and the images that Dan throws in for us to help visualize, like a keel boat, you'll be able to see that on the YouTube channel. Again, we want to thank the Frith Chronicles fandom, as they are the ones that we get a lot of our information from. And we really do appreciate everything that they do. And you can get in touch with us by emailing us at frithguildpod@gmail.com. Or you can send us a message on Facebook or comment on the Facebook page and get all of us there. All right. Thank you guys for listening, and we'll see you next week.